I was scouring the internet for some sort of paying gig. I didn't care what. Then I came across a post on Craigslist. I had just refreshed the page and there it was. Someone was looking for a person to come by and feed their pets. I assumed they were going out of town or something, so I contacted them and left my number through email. I got a response immediately in the form of a phone call. The caller was a man who explained to me that he was moving out of town and his parents had cats they wanted to be fed daily. I gave the man my name so he could run me through a cursory background check, and in about 20 minutes I was hired. I went there the next morning to get all the instructions and whatnot, and met the man I'd spoken to on the phone. His name was Ben. Ben explained to me that he would no longer be able to care for his parents' cats, and that his parents needed to focus on themselves, so I was being brought on to take care of that. The money would be left on the kitchen table at the end of every week, $200 a week, just to feed some cats, I know, right? In addition to that, money for more cat food would be left for me as needed. Then he told me the first thing that I thought was strange. I was to come at exactly 10 a.m. every day and be gone by 10 a.m. And I was to never, under any circumstances, interact with his parents. He told me that when I'm in their home, they will be in their chairs in the living room, watching television, and that I was not to disturb them, ever. He asked if any of that would be a problem, to which I assured him it wouldn't. He then showed me the area in which the cats eat. There were 4 cats, and where the food was kept. While not rude in the least, he was very adamant that I not explore further in the house, which I promised him wouldn't be a problem. He ushered me outside and showed me where the spare key was in case the door was ever locked, but he told me that was very unlikely to happen. And with that, he expressed his hope that I could be trusted one last time, shook my hand, and told me to be there at 10 a.m. every day starting tomorrow. If I was ever unable to make it, call and leave a message on their home phone, to which he gave me the number. I shook my head and was on my way. The next day came, and I went inside at exactly 10 a.m. I walked into the house, and immediately to my right were Ben's parents, sitting in recliners, facing away from me, watching some kind of game show. I announced my presence, which they ignored, and made my way to the kitchen. I fed the cats bowls and left. This same scenario played out countless times over the next few months. 10 a.m., unreturned hello, feed the cats, leave. On Fridays, I would pick up the small stack of $20 bills from the kitchen table. It was the easiest job I ever had. Then came the inevitable. One day, I was running late. I got to the house at 10:08. I entered and apologized to Ben's parents for being late, to which I once again got no response. They just kept sitting in their chairs watching their game show. I went to the kitchen and fed the cats. I looked at my phone, which read 10:11, and walked down the hall toward the front door. When I reached the living room, I jumped and gasped out of shock. Ben's parents were now standing in the dark behind their chairs, completely still, staring directly at me. I apologized for running late and got out of there. Though unnerved, I went back the next day on time, and everything was fine. A few more months went by of nothing strange, and then came the last day I was there. I got there at 10:03, but wasn't worried because I knew I could be out before 10:10. The problem came when I was in the kitchen, and I heard someone whisper the words, "Help me." It startled me, and I jumped, looking around for the source of the cry for help. I saw no one around, but I heard it again, and then a third time. I began looking around before realizing I was running behind. I looked at my phone and it was 10:10. My heart sank to my stomach when I looked down the hallway and saw Ben's parents for the first time in the light. They were grossly emaciated and pale, looking completely malnourished. They were essentially walking skeletons. I apologized for taking so long and said I'd be on my way, but they just stood there, blocking the way to the front door. I said I would take the back door, which was located in the kitchen, but when I went to open it, I found that it required a key to open from the inside. Seriously. It was at this point that true panic set in. I looked behind me, and the parents were now about half a foot away from the entrance to the kitchen, and I had nowhere else to go except what I presumed was a door to a pantry. They had blank stares across their faces, and their eyes looked as if life had left them a long time ago. In a last-ditch effort, I went to the door that I thought was the pantry, and was instead met with a staircase leading into a basement, with, of course, no light. As soon as I opened the door, there was a horrid stench that washed over the otherwise clean air I was standing in. I carefully went down the stairs and looked for a window, but they were all nailed shut. I happened to look back up the stairs, and the parents were now standing next to each other at the top of the stairs. It was truly horrifying. I pulled out my phone and called 911, not knowing what else to do, and when I explained my situation, they said they would send a car out immediately, and to stay on the phone while they connected me to the unit en route. I ran into the dark basement using my phone as a light. It didn't provide too much illumination since I was in the middle of a call, but it was just enough. There were racks of junk that lined the basement, separating it into almost aisles. I went down to check if any of the windows were possibly loose, like I'd be that lucky. Then I turned around and shined the light in front of me, and I was inches away from the parents' lifeless-looking faces. I let out a scream and ran in the other direction and tripped over something, sending my phone flying from my hand. Of course, it landed face down so I couldn't find it. I ran back up the stairs and into the kitchen, looking back and seeing the parents standing at the bottom of the stairs, with slight grins on their faces. I ran down the hall to the front door and flung it open, screaming when I saw the cop standing right in front of me. He asked me if I was the one that called as I pushed past him to get outside, and told him I was. I looked in the window and saw the parents sitting in their chairs, watching their game show. I explained that these crazy old people had trapped me in their house and were chasing me around. The cop went in to talk to the parents and look around while I sat in the cop car. He came back out about 5 minutes later and asked if I was sure someone was chasing me. I said yes, I was sure, that it was the two old people that lived there. He informed me that the people that lived there, the people in the chairs, have been dead for quite some time. I asked what the smell in the basement was, and he said there was another body down there. The backup showed up. I gave them my statement and explained how I'd been coming there every day for months and months to feed the cats. I told them to call Ben, the homeowner's son. I gave them the number, and it was disconnected. I found out a few days later that the body found in the basement was Ben. What still haunts me to this day is, who posted the ad on Craigslist? If Ben was dead, then who did I meet with? And who's been paying me? One night while scrolling through the jobs section of Craigslist, I stumbled upon an ad for help tending a farm. It provided living quarters, free meals, and the best part, money. The ad was written by a man who said he had inherited a farm but was getting too old to tend to the animals and crops as efficiently as he once used to. The pay was extremely good, and I had a place to stay rent-free. After about 2 hours of deliberation, I decided to go ahead and send him an email. I explained I only needed this temporarily, as I was saving money for school. I told him I could be a reliable worker, but only for 6 months. I didn't expect an answer back, as he probably wanted something longer or more permanent. It only took about 15 minutes before I received a response. I sent the email at 2 a.m. I admit I was a little off-put by the speedy reply, especially since it was the middle of the night. I figured he'd be sleeping. Anyways, the email he sent was pretty short and to the point. He explained any help was good enough and said he'd be ready for my arrival the following day. He left the address and his phone number. The next morning I packed everything I wanted to take, told my mother I was leaving for a job, and I'd stay in contact and headed out to the farm. When I arrived, he was nothing like I had imagined. He was tall and reasonably overweight. He had a beard that wasn't quite full, but still enough to be called a beard, I guess. His eyes were dark. I could barely make out his pupils. Upon approaching him with my bags, he reached out to me. I dropped my bags and shook his hand. It felt forced. It wasn't a very friendly handshake. It was firm, almost gripping. He let go, and I felt my arm fall to my side. He asked me to hurry in, so I did. He quickly showed me to my room and asked if I could start right away. Flustered, I dropped my belongings in my room and threw my phone and keys on the bed. I quickly changed my pants into jeans and put on some old shoes. I walked out to the main hall. He stood there, almost mannequin-like. When we locked eyes, he started telling me my tasks. I was to tend to the field 3 times a day. He said he had plowed over the land to begin anew. He was planting corn, and a lot of it. He claimed he was going to sell and distribute the corn to local grocery stores. I asked about the animals, and he said there were none. Before I could ask anything further, he cut me off and threw me a shovel. He asked me to fill in holes throughout the farm before he could till the land. I took the shovel and hurried out of the door. Staring at him was uncomfortable. I was tired. I had barely slept the night before. Hell, I had sent the email the night before. This all felt like a whirlwind, but all I thought about was the money. I knew in my gut this wasn't right, but I needed this. The farm was huge. You couldn't even see the house at the end of the field anymore. I know because I had to walk the whole way through it to fill in holes. Holes I never found, by the way, until the edge of the farm. It was surrounded by thick forest. I knew it was a rural area, but I didn't realize the farm was a one-way in, one-way out kind of deal. The forest was dense, really dense. You'd get lost in a matter of seconds if you weren't paying attention. When I reached the very end of the farm, I noticed only one hole, and about 14 others already filled in gaps. Why would he send me out here, over a mile away, to fill in one hole? I felt uneasy about the whole thing. As I started to fill in the hole, which was about 10 feet deep, I couldn't stop glancing over at the already filled-in disturbed ground. After I filled in about 2 feet worth of dirt, my curiosity got the best of me. I decided to dig into one of the already filed holes. These were not small holes. They were wide and about 12 feet in length. They were big enough to fit a deceased cow. Hell, maybe even 2. I'd already figured that's what the case was, considering there weren't any animals. I'm glad I went with my gut. It didn't take much digging to reach the first, weird object. It was a wallet. I picked it up and opened it, but it was empty. I tossed it to the side and kept digging. That's when I saw a hint of red fabric. I couldn't tell right away what it was. It could have been an animal wrapped in a blanket. It's safe to say I was heading into denial. It was only about 4 feet down when I discovered the body. Her body was in bad shape, but she wasn't decomposing. All of the trauma she went through was clear on her skin. I knelt and felt her body. She was cold. I sat there for a couple of minutes, just staring at her. Once I realized that her time of death had to be within the last 48 hours, I ran to the nearest tree and vomited. I didn't even bother filling in the hole I was supposed to, but I reburied the girl. Her body didn't deserve to be exposed like that. After that, I ran. I felt like an Olympic athlete. It was starting to get dark and I had to make it back before then, or I'd be wandering around this field for hours. The last thing I wanted was to be hunted down like an animal in the pitch black. I knew that's what he was going to do. He knew filling the hole would have taken until dark. Once I reached the house, I finally stopped to catch my breath. I knew I had to remain composed, or he would know. I regulated my breathing and walked in. He was sitting at the dining table to the left of the house. I couldn't tell what he was doing, but once he heard me open the front door, his head swung around so fast I thought he'd snap his neck. He looked at me like a deer in the headlights. It was obvious he hadn't expected me back so soon. "You're done?" I could tell he was trying everything in his power to remain calm. "I got sick. I had to come back. I'll go back out to finish it. I have to use the bathroom." I tried to sound as nonchalant as I could, but I knew he could tell I was lying. After looking at me up and down, he said, "Okay then, get back to it. I want it done by tonight." I shook my head and hurried to my room. I took the clothes I had taken off when I arrived and shoved them into my suitcase. I was so happy I hadn't unpacked. I grabbed my phone, but my keys were gone. Frantic, I started looking for them as quietly as possible. He took them. I knew it. My original plan was to run in, grab my things, and book it the hell out of there, which is pretty hard to do with no keys. I sat on the bed for a moment. My phone had no signal, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I started going through my pictures. If I was going to die, I wanted to see my friends and family one more time. Even if it was just over a phone screen, it felt like enough. That's when I stumbled upon my 23rd birthday party when my mother gifted me my car as a present. I stood proudly by my car, with a set of keys in each hand. I had 2 sets of keys. I don't know why it didn't dawn on me earlier. I never used them, but I always carried them in case I locked myself out of my car. I unzipped my suitcase and pulled everything out of it. At the very bottom was my second set of keys. They must have been the first thing I threw in while packing. It was a mindless habit at that point, and in that moment, I couldn't have been more proud of myself. I decided to say screw the clothes and grab my phone and the keys. I peeked out of the bedroom and walked to the bathroom. It wasn't hard to act ill because I was already nauseated from sheer terror and anxiety. I tried to make exaggerated gagging sounds, but I eventually threw up. It wasn't my intention, but it made it more realistic. I rinsed out my mouth and stuck my phone and keys into the side of my pants. I made sure they weren't obvious and headed back out of the main area. Still sitting at the dining table, I told him I was ready to finish the work. He nodded, and I walked out. I started walking toward the farm again because when I looked behind me, he was watching me through the window. I walked slowly, and once he wasn't watching anymore, I fled to my car. He heard my frantic running and bolted outside. By then I was already in my car and pulling out. He started to sprint at full speed at my car, and I floored it. I heard 2 gunshots ring out, and I felt the slight impact as one of the bullets shot through the passenger seat. I sped until I felt safe. It had taken me 4 hours to get there, and about 2 to get home. I immediately went to my mother's and told her everything. Turns out, there were 52 bodies discovered on the farmland when I reported what had happened to the authorities. They conducted a thorough search of the whole farm. Many missing person cases that went cold throughout the years were coming to light. The only thing they didn't find was him. I look every few months to see if they finally have a lead, but they never do. The name he had given me was fake, and the phone number was that of a burner phone. I didn't have any pictures of him. I described him to a sketch artist, and that was about it. When I was 19, I was looking for a room to rent in the city I was moving to for college. It was about an hour away from my family. I wasn't having much luck, and my mom started helping me look for a place. She found an ad on Craigslist for a room for $300 in a house, everything included. The homeowner was a man, and he rented the additional rooms upstairs to other women while he lived in the finished basement. The ad stated he rarely ever saw the other roommates because he had a kitchen and his entrance downstairs, and that he preferred women because he had issues with male roommates in the past partying and causing damage. We decided to take a look since it was the cheapest that we could find in the area. My mom and I went to the house to view it. Decent house, in a decent neighborhood. He opened the door and was very welcoming. He was middle-aged, and the kitchen and living room were furnished nicely and clean. My mom loves to talk and get to know people, so they were engaged in conversation while I stood there quietly and observed the place. He then said he would show me my room. We head towards the staircase to go up, as I thought, since he said on the phone my room was upstairs with the other roommates, but he opens another door and we follow. He takes us down to the basement and opens a door to a very small room, with no closet and no windows. He proceeds to say this is my room, and I will be sharing the bathroom in the hallway with him. His bedroom did not have a door on it. I was thinking that this is weird, but they were so deep in conversation that I couldn't interject. He then leads us upstairs and shows us the other rooms which the doors were open and said they are currently rented. He then starts telling us stories about the other women. Not very nice stories describing drinking problems. My mom was listening intently, but I took the time to investigate further. I looked in all 3 rooms and the bathrooms. There was furniture but not a single item in there that looked like it belonged to a woman. No clothes or anything. Only men's clothes in one of the closets. He had no problem with me creeping around his tenants' rooms without their permission. I then heard him tell my mom that he has some of his stuff in their closets, but they don't mind, and I'm just like, why the hell would a tenant pay you for you to use their space as storage? I was feeling uncomfortable and started moving them back downstairs as they talked. My mom had mentioned when we arrived that she and my dad were going on vacation the next week, but I couldn't go because I had to work. He brought it up again and told me that I should come by the next week and have dinner with him and the roomies to see if we would all get along. I said sure, and we left. As soon as we got in the car, I told my mom I would not be living there. She was dumbfounded. I had to explain to her not only did he lie about the room I would be in, that I was not supposed to be in the basement with him as well as share a bathroom with him, and he didn't even have a damn door, but also did she not notice how no one else even lived there? She still didn't get it, and thought I was just being paranoid, and thought he was nice, and it was a cheap deal. I had to explain it to my stepdad and get him to tell her by no means would I be living there. I tried to report the post, but by the time we got home that day, he removed it. I think he planned on murdering me at dinner, or abducting me and holding me hostage in that basement room that had no way to escape. I hope that guy hits a tree with his car one day. I told this to a friend of mine whose father worked in law enforcement, and he pointed out this was probably a sex trafficking situation. The bedroom in the basement is where a victim is kept, drugged, and abused until broken, and then trafficked. I honestly think this is more plausible with the situation, as well as my city is actually a hotspot for that. I'm so grateful we got out of there, and I hope my experience could help someone one day notice the details and get out of the situation safely.